Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to the EUROCONTROL Stakeholder Forum strategic webinar, No One Left Behind, Building the Next Generation in Air Traffic Management. I'm delighted to have you with us here today. My name is Philip Hughes, Head of Aviation Planning at EUROCONTROL, and I'll be moderating today's session. So, as our industry undergoes a period of profound transformation driven by innovation, digitization, sustainability pressures, and evolving social expectations, one thing is clear. The future of air traffic management depends on the people behind it. The urgency of attracting, developing, and retaining a skilled, resilient, and inclusive workforce has never been greater. Ensuring the next generation of professionals reflect the full diversity of society and is prepared to thrive is essential to the sustainability and resilience of our sector. Over the next hour, we'll delve into some of the most pressing questions facing our industry. For instance, how can we better support all members of the aviation workforce, from licensed personnel to those in non-licensed role? How do we ensure our workforce strategies keep pace with technological change? What steps are being taken to improve recruitment, retention, training? And how can we make sure that no one is left behind as we build a more diverse, skilled, and future-ready ATM workforce? So, to help us explore these topics, we're joined by 4 outstanding speakers, each offering a unique perspective from across the aviation ecosystem, including policy, operations, workforce representation, and DEI leadership. They'll be sharing insights and practical approaches for ensuring that no one is left behind as we shape a more collaborative and resilient ATM sector. So we encourage your participation throughout the panel, or throughout the session rather, and please use the Q&A function to submit questions to the panel, and feel free to use the chat if you encounter any technical issues. So let's get started. I'm pleased to introduce today's panel. First of all, we have Gautier Strutzer, Chair of the ATM Committee at the European Transport Workers Federation. We have Betsy Bowman, Co-Chair of IFATCA's EDI Task Force. Conor Mullen, CANSO Executive Committee DEI Champion and Managing Director at Think. And then Meenakshi Bowman, Executive Manager at Eurocontrol's Maastricht UAC. I should mention that Meenakshi has just been awarded this year's prestigious Gloria Heath Trophy by the Flight Safety Foundation, which recognises her visionary leadership and commitment to advancing just culture and safety. And now, to kick things off, I'm pleased to give the floor to our first panelist, Gautier Strutzer, to talk, Chair of the ATM Committee and the European Transport Workers Federation. So Gautier will share his perspectives on the central question of today's webinar. So Gautier, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me and the ETF to speak. I am indeed Gautier Strutzer, an air traffic controller since 2002, working in Lille Approach and Tower, affiliated to the French trade union USAC CGT, and in charge of or involved in European affairs since 12 years already, and chairing the ATM committee since 3 years. So when it comes to leaving no one behind, one must probably look back at what we have currently in the field of ATM. ATM is often finger-pointed by various stakeholders for delays, for cancellations, and for the numbers of industrial disputes we have within the sector. All of these issues are linked, if not due to, recruitment and staff retention difficulties. One element to fix these issues is to build in DEI, so that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. For recruitment, for example, we tend to select those alike, and that's something we need to fight with, and to make sure that we actually select those who are fit for purpose. So that brings the added value of diversity and equality of chances of opportunities that we have. Now, when it comes to retention, we must make sure that we have inclusivity as part of the air navigation service providers culture. And we must make also, when it comes to training, the extra effort to keep those we select as part of the workforce, and make sure that we have everyone up to standard once we have the selection process completed, and perhaps not mix the selection and the training syllabus, because those are two different topics, and in many places around the world, and especially in the EU, there's sometimes a bit of a mix-up between those two streams. And we know that in France, where I work, because the success rate for the air traffic controllers is over 95%, because when we lose an opportunity to have one recruit on board, then we're not getting it back, because as civil servants, those are the rules that are set upon us by the states. If someone jumps out of being a civil servant, then the employment is completely lost for good. So we must make sure that we have everyone on board of this effort. And I think that what we have ahead of us is not only focused on air traffic controllers, but that involves everyone in the workforce of air traffic management, be it for ATSEPs, where diversity is probably one of the biggest issue, because the gender balance for these professions is really imbalanced, one must say. And probably also there's an issue in terms of visibility for other operational professions within the field of ATM, and that's probably something we need to work on to make sure that we have, as best as we can.
Okay. Thanks, Gauthier. So I'll now move to our second speaker, Betsy Bowman. Betsy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Philip. It's definitely an honor to be here today and to get to speak. I started my career with air traffic in 1990 as I was selected for an internship through the University of North Dakota and the FAA. And so I've been with the FAA now for over 33 years, and 30 of that as an air traffic controller. The last 15 years, I worked two different positions on the safety side with the air traffic safety program as an analyst. For about 7 years, I did safety reports from the air traffic controllers. And then the last 8 were on the airline side, where I had about 16 airlines that I processed their safety reports. What's been interesting is watching how things have evolved over those 30 plus years, both through training, work environment changes that impact the human in the loop, so to speak, whether it's bringing more women in that we're dealing with situations that impact them having to deal with pregnancy, and how we can embrace that as a culture and support one another through it. I've also recently been selected to be a part of a work group that's focused on andropause and menopause, which is becoming more prevalent as we see an aging workforce. So I noticed that with what we're talking about today, it's not just recruitment, but retention. And so it's enticing a workforce that reaches every gamut of what you're looking for. And so really, when we say no one left behind, it's getting people on board through enticement of why he would be interested in not just this career, but a long-term career for the retention side of it. And what IFATCA's main focus tends to be is the value of our people. And of course, with IFATCA, we're focused on ATCOs, but we do recognize through our technical operations team and our professional and legal committee that it impacts everyone, whether it's air traffic controllers that are talking to the aircraft, or the management side, or what we're working with as far as equipment goes and rules that apply to us. So The main focus, though, for us always are our people. And so that's what I'll be highlighting later today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Betsy. So, Connor, the CANSO perspective.
Thank you, Philip. So, hello, everybody. My name is Conor Mullen. I'm the Managing Director of Think Research, which is a global aviation consultancy, but I'm here today in my role as CANSO Associate Member Representative. For those of you that don't know CANSO, it is the global ATM membership organization. It has currently about 100 ANSPs in its membership and a further 100 industry providers, also research institutions. And together they make up about 34,000 aviation professionals covering 90% of the world's air traffic. So I was elected by the associate members to be the representative on the executive committee of CANSO, and on that committee we have roles. And one of my roles is the diversity, equity and inclusion champion since summer last year, in fact. And more broadly, I suppose CANSO in recent years has realized that it needs to strengthen its position as, in their words, the voice of airspace. And that's meant shifting from taking maybe a passive or reactive position on some topics to being more proactively positive. And so with regard to today's topic, that means taking positions in regard to training, recruitment, future skills, and of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it's worth probably looking at each of those in turn. Looking to the future, 4 years ago, CANSO recognized that in their view, something was missing, which was a single aligned vision of what the future skies would look like. And in response, it created the CATS Council, CATS being the complete air traffic system. And what that is, it's a cross-industry collaboration involving about 80 members from across the ecosystems, airlines, airports, UAM manufacturers, space agencies, and so on. And that forum has since launched a vision and a roadmap, and just last month, the CATS CONOPS, the Concept of Operations. And the CONOPS is a technical document, but it's also a collective call to action. And of relevance in that is it builds upon the CATS roadmap, and that's got clear goals surrounding people, organization, and talent, basically identifying the skills in the workforce that we're going to need in the future ATM environment. CANSO is also looking at training and recruitment, because we can talk about the future, but if you talk to a lot of ANSPs, they'll tell you that whilst they understand the need to talk about the future, they've got a big spotlight on them about the delivery of services today. And so CANSO is doing a few things on that. It's looking at an operational training roundtable, looking at increasing capacity of training programs to accept more students, reducing training times, and improving training success rates. There's a paper going into the ICAO Assembly on progressive licensing and with support from the FATCA. And then finally, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is the role I champion. So, I mean, the CATS CONOPS talks about how its diversity and inclusion are integral to our culture and enable increased innovation and agility. We also have a moral duty to consider diversity, equity, and inclusion. So CANSO has a work group set up. We're taking a more active role on DEI initiatives and events. We want to look at what people are doing locally, so what the members are doing locally, and promote those at a regional and a global level, because that's the power that CANSO has. It's a global organization that can platform the good ideas and use its power and its voice. And what its aim is really is to get a globally coordinated view on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what we should do about it. Ideally, we get together, we coordinate CANSO, EUROCONTROL, ICAO, FATCA, and organizations like that. But I'll finish just on saying that with CANSO and with the working groups, we're essentially an army of volunteers. A lot of this takes time, and it's not our day job. It can be hard to get people to make it a priority. Everybody thinks that we all agree this should be something that we do, but it's a real push to actually get it to happen. More so because it's looking at cultural changes, and anybody that's done those knows they're hard. It's a constant battle. You have to just monotonously, repetitive, keep talking about it and continual improvement. And hopefully today's just another step in that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Connor. Yeah, I think it's the persistence of dealing with these kind of issues is challenging, I think, for all of us. And that's why I suppose this forum is important. Milena, coming to you now and your perspective on this.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And it's very easy to build up on what Connor said. My day-to-day job is Executive Manager of Operations Room. I've been in air traffic management for 30 plus years now. But actually, for the last 12 years, I have been encouraged from the agency, and I have been given enough time and resources to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And very quickly, we understood that it's not only a problem for one company, but it's a problem for the whole industry. Even more, it's not even a problem only for air traffic management, but it's a problem of along the chain of aviation. Therefore, for the last 7 or 8 years, since 2018, I and Eurocontrol have been working on making a network, facilitating exchange and collaboration so that we can leverage scale of economies and we can leverage the knowledge that we have. Because here is the thing, everybody speaks about pilots and air traffic controllers. These are the two most visible professions. But actually, we need ground handlers, we need engineers, we need simulator specialists, NOTAM officers, name it. We need a lot of people. In Europe specifically, there is a number we should know of. Out of the 700 million Europeans, about 200 million never ever left their country. Out of the others, the rest, many of them have never lived, seen, been on an airplane. For them, aviation is a concept that exists in the movies. And these are the people who will be our new customers, and these are the people to whom we have to reach out. And yes, they will not look like us, they will not sound like us, they will not have the language, the professional language we have, and the knowledge, the historical knowledge of aviation. Therefore, we have to actively reach out to them, actively attract them. And there are some obstacles we have to overcome. Somebody mentioned the training, indeed, with a leading training between 30 and 43 months. It's a great investment on a person to become an air traffic controller. In some countries, people have to pay for that education themselves. That is a challenge, of course, for these countries to attract people. There is a barrier, financial barrier, even you may say. Also, there is a perception of aviation of being very hard, very difficult to manage, to raise a family, and to work on shift. These are the types of perceptions we have to work against, understand, explain to people how you can be a traffic controller and a mother or a father. We have to look hard to ourselves because there are new skills that are required. We'll be looking not for a specialist. AI, for example, will be part of everyone's skill tools. And these are things we have to take a look into. And of course, once we attract people, we have to retain them. There comes that inclusive culture. There comes how we entice people to offer them not only a vertical career path, but also horizontal career path. For many of the new generations would not be happy if you tell them, well, there is a license and a traffic controller, and this is what you're going to do for the next 40 years. Throughout our collaboration, we have found a lot of good practices that we can exchange. For example, we identified we as companies, NSPs, for example, we have to go out and present the different types of professions and how people can get to those professions to school. We have open days. We can do interactive webinars. These are tested with great success. So children or young people from anywhere in the country can log in and see what professions there are in different sides of air traffic management. There are some moments of gamifying as well. We know good experience of Roblox, of Minecraft. We also can send people to the schools. So that's like presenting ourselves to schools, by which we make ourselves more findable. We're doing there are a lot of good campaigns on Reddit, on Facebook, LinkedIn, but we also know that people would like to see specifically in their country what they do. So there are repositories that are being built both in the GAST, the Global Aerospace Task Force, And also in Europe, we have engaged two CESAR project also working in that area. So a lot to offer, a lot to exchange. We have to be persistent because this is for us, having enough people is enabler of capacity, that we can have enough staff for our services. Having enough people will reduce fatigue. That means that it will decrease the safety risk for occurrences, for safety occurrences when it happens. And it is increasing the productivity if we are working in an inclusive atmosphere. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Milena. Okay, so very interesting introduction there from everybody. A lot of ground to cover, and I think particularly interesting around the being proactive, I suppose, in terms of actively attracting people into the profession and to make it appear attractive. If I start with you, Conor, I mean, one of the speakers alluded to the problem that it's related to the whole industry, not just in terms of ATM. So what's driving the renewed focus on the next generation of aviation professionals, and why, in the industry's view, is it critical to its future?
Yeah. I mean, I think we say renewed focus, but I think it's probably been a focus for quite a while. It's just our priorities change depending on how urgent the matter is. And I'm going to talk about, the seismic global events of 5 years ago without mentioning the global event of 5 years ago. I'll let you be the first person to mention it, Philip. But prior to that, the industry and the landscape was going through a gradual change anyway. Technologically, we were going through a gradual change. We had, obviously, in Europe here with the single European sky, and for a while we started talking about the digital European sky. So things were moving anyway. We had a year in 2019, obviously, with a lot of capacity challenges across Europe. So we were probably aware of the focus on people, but it probably wasn't our priority. And then, of course, something happens in 2020 which suddenly makes people a priority. The change, I suppose, that 2020 was an accelerator. It takes that trend of maybe habits that people were doing, of the way technologies were going, and it accelerates that. And it becomes a disruption, and it disrupts in a way where probably what happened is it accelerated people leaving the industry through various organizations making financial cuts and trying to make savings. It accelerated the leaving rate of people in the industry, and it decelerated the rate at which people joined. There weren't as many new jobs, there weren't as many people going through training. And so you have those kind of two influences combining. And it leads to where we've been probably since about 21, 22, which is a shortfall of people. So I think, that naturally has focused the mind now. It's become a big priority for us now because we see that capacity challenges are less about demand versus capacity. And airspace capacity is about the capacity of the system in terms of the humans. We are seeing that as a challenge. And of course, the technological change since then has accelerated as well. We see a lot more people looking at different versions of the future for resilience, modernization, and so on. And so I think it has become a priority. While it's always been a focus, that renewal, if you like, has been the increase in priority in the last couple of years or so. And we see it being felt in different ways. You talked about the industry, and CANSO obviously has full members, which are the NSPs. It has associate members, which are the industry. Yeah. And speaking from my industry point of view, we've probably experienced it a little bit less in terms of this challenge in attracting and retaining talent. I think we've probably experienced it a little bit less compared to ANSPs because we are probably a bit more flexible. One of the things that we have these days is things like this. We have a lot of location independence, and that's become a human thing. Just this need for almost location independence. People seek that. They don't want to be tied down to a certain location. Of course, our operational industry, with the exceptions of things like digital towers and so on, is still quite location dependent. So I think all these things are combining the accelerated rate of leaving, the decelerated rate of joining, the change in habits and customs of us as a human race and the technological changes, it's meaning that it's become something that was there but not a priority to suddenly being our priority because we're seeing the impact now that it has on our industry.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that whole culture change post-COVID, I think, has really accelerated a lot of the trends which were there before. And I think the other challenge as well for, particularly for ANSPs, is the lead time in terms of reaction. Like you said, what struck me was that there was a cutoff in terms of recruitment during that period, and now I think there's a huge struggle to catch up as well, and also to continue to make the whole industry attractive. So, Betsy, you mentioned specifically that it was really about the value of the people, the retention and the aging piece. So, why do you think it's important to focus on DEI in terms of diversity and inclusion and equity? How important an element do you think that is in order to make sure that we address some of these concerns that Connor's raised?
Oh, absolutely. Would love to expand on that. So last year, IFATCA was inspired to start a new campaign that really focused on 4 specific words that got brought up by one of our ATCOs. And those words were safe, seen, valued, and included. And it was in a conversation, and they talked about the fact that being involved with IFATCA for just a short time, they recognized that they were actually getting those things from IFATCA when they were at conference or in the regional meetings. And so this year we decided to try and do something new, and we invited 4 air traffic controllers that were from 4 different regions from around the world with 4 very different backgrounds culturally, and also obviously religiously, and whether it was male or female, we tried to do a broad spectrum of it. And we asked each person to speak about one of the words and why they felt it was important for them to be productive in their work life and how they recognized it with IFATCA. And what we learned was that these 4 words were seriously a foundation to not just IFATCA's success, but truly for the workforce. Because with 0 prompting or guidance from the equity, diversity, inclusion team, we literally just said, this is your word. Tell us why you feel it's important. And if you feel that IFATCA brings this about. And I could not believe what the 4 individuals brought to the table. Some of the things were that one of the words was that it fostered a culture of feeling supported, informed, and confident. It was mentioned that IFATCA was great at protecting individual integrity and ensuring that their voices were literally heard. And so this is ultimately accomplished because IFATCA stands up globally for ATCOs through advocacy, training, and unity, which we try to bring to the table at every conference and every regional meeting. We value each member and what they bring forward with not just their experience and their knowledge, but then who they are and helping us each understand what we've gone through or what we're currently experiencing. And one of our members literally said, you would really expect to get lost in the shuffle when you're at a conference with, 800 people from around the world. And that's literally far from the truth. Because in IFATCA, I'm completely recognized and engaged. And I thought that that was very powerful because it's easy to get lost in a sea of faces, so to speak. But this has become almost our ethos, that we believe that each person not only gets a seat at the table, but that they deserve to be there because each of us adds to, just the beauty of what our job, our focus and everything is of who we are. Because, air traffic controllers are literally all over the world. And so you can't just say, well, we should do it this way because that's how, for me, in the United States that we do it. We can learn from hearing others' experiences and thinking, I never thought about doing it that way, but that worked incredibly well for, you know, the Irish controllers. So let's start doing it like them. And so another person made note that being included is a necessity, as it literally empowers you to have a voice. And it reminds us that literally, again, no matter where we come from, we all belong in IFATCA and, again, have a seat at the table. So the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion team is continuing all the time to try and educate our membership on what EDI is as opposed to what it is not. We recognize that education and support are the things that we can control for our membership globally. We don't focus just on one region. We learn and glean from everyone, because that really is what DEI is. And we say EDI is our team. We just have moved the letters around if anybody gets confused about that. But it still means the same thing, right? Diversity, equality, and inclusion. So our focus is ensuring safety and making sure that our members feel safe is one of our tenets. And so our hope is that the information that we continue to provide to our members will be something that then they can take back to their ANSPs to encourage in their working environment and allow them to be an example for fostering a workplace where they do feel safe, seen, valued, and included.
Thanks, Betsy. Yeah, I think that sense of affirmation for people that they're involved and included and that they're valued, I think for every industry is extremely important. And I think that's what's probably what most people seek in terms of reward. But certainly safe, seen, valued, and included, I think, is a very good reference point where you can see all of those different elements. So just on the professional associations then for Gautier, we have a question here from my FATSI, which says, despite years of discussion, we still face persistent shortages in certain aviation roles. What structural flaws within the aviation industry continue to hinder the attraction and retention of next generation talent, and what radical changes are actually needed? So what do you think are the key challenges that the industry faces in the attraction and development of a future-ready workforce, I suppose?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I want to thank IFATSEA, whom we work with, as well as IFATCA on a regular basis on these DE&I topics. But actually, to address also the key challenges that we have, we must also probably go out of this field. Because the first challenge that comes to mind actually is ATM funding, and making sure we have the resources available for us so that we can deliver up to expectations. So in Europe, probably the most prominent issue is the ATM performance and charging scheme. Because here the thought of policymakers and airspace users is on cost efficiency rather than ATM funding, which we believe it should be. And that's especially true when capacity is expected to be the highest expectation, because the manufacturers of aircraft are telling us that their orders are beyond the roof, and that we are expecting the fleet to grow and to double in the next 15 years. So that's one element. The second element is to fit the expectations from the new generation. The new generation expects us to make sure that we have a world we can live in sustainably. And addressing the environmental issue is probably something that we actually need to do rather than only talking about it and actually not delivering about it. So what we think, for example, that ATM contribution could be is that we have a centralized function in charge of answering the requests from airspace users to fly from A to B with a route and a level. This would enable to have the most a sustainable route for aircrafts. And that's something that requires further research to be implemented. Unfortunately, the ATM program that we have in the EU is not addressing that issue right now. Amongst the other expectations of the young generation is to make sure that they can change career if and when they want to. So that's also something that we need to keep in mind. We have a long training scheme to become professionals of many ATM professions, and that's probably something which we need to reorganize a bit so that we have flexibility built in from the start in terms of the training scheme. And that's probably something that we need to further look into. But also, of course, communication to the outside world, making what we do known to the outside world. Because if you ask a random people what an air traffic controller does, I would say that you're likely to get, as part of your answers, if you ask 5 people, that one will say it's the person checking your ticket when you enter the aircraft. And that's still something that comes to mind, as well as the marshalling of the aircraft when they come to stand. So probably there's some communication effort to do, and I thank you very much for having this webinar, because it's part of the communication effort we need to have.
Thanks, Gauthier. I can identify with your last comment. My mother-in-law, for years when I was working in the ANSP, thought I worked for the airport, and that took a long time to disabuse her of that. So I completely know where you're coming from. Melaine, if I come to you, you spoke a little bit about actively attracting people. You mentioned that aviation suffers, so to speak, from a tough image. I think most of us as aviation professionals agree that it's a rewarding career, and there's a lot to offer in terms of rewarding career paths. How do you think we should entice the new generation to join a career in aviation, and what kind of conditions do you think need to be there?
Thank you so much for this question. You're right. We have to get down to concrete actions. And one of the things we learned through our collaborations with the organizations of all the participants of this webinar, with ICAO, with EASA, with DG Move, we understand that aggregated data and aggregated efforts on industry level are needed, but to get to local people to apply for the professions, you have to act locally. And that is not one solution fits all. Each company has to take a look in their local markets, their local challenges. When I heard a lot the word challenges, let me try to turn it around. Why not look at it as opportunities? For example, in EU countries, we have a free labor market. Why don't we look in those language barriers and take a look how people can themselves better, freer move between countries, for example? We have to take a look into how we engage scholarships. Think about, and I heard the word diversity, and it's great to unpack it a little bit. It's not only gender, it's not only LGBTQ. It's about people coming from different socioeconomic background as well. Those people, as I said, have never ever experienced aviation. For them, there is a strong barrier to consider anything in aviation. So we should be looking into bursary programs, scholarship, internship programs that we can entice those young people to come over. Keep in mind as well, for a traffic controller, for one, makes sense to move family or to move location. But if you are working in a less well-paid job, you are unlikely to change your location if you live in a small city and have to go to live in a bigger and much more expensive city. So the companies have to take into account all these context so that they can assure transition for people. We're not saying lifelong support, but transition should be taken into account. Then we looked into the lifelong learning. Indeed, we cannot attract people to come, offering them only one thing. We can say, yes, you start like this, and these opportunities you can have specific for the company, specific for the location, specific for the sector that the company is working in, so that we can all have enough people. I borrow here on our military partners, but they pretty much say, come to us, we'll find you a job. I really applaud that. Come to aviation, we will find you a job. There are so many jobs to be done. For a flight to go from A to B on time, with all people on board, with all the catering on, with all the cabin crew on, throughout all the sectors without any delays, throughout airports, a lot of positions need to be staffed, and we should be working together towards this. That's why we, for example, made the D&I toolkit to get more pragmatic. We have published it on Skybrary. It's on the EUROCONTROL website. It's done in collaboration with over 30 organizations, including IFATC, including ETF, including Council, including EASA, where we say, okay, these are the ways concretely that each organization can take locally to engage, to either improve the local culture, improve the learning initiatives, improve its communication, to be more inclusive and attractive to the young people. We should challenge ourselves finally to think differently. Yes, during COVID, a lot of companies, I know, they cut off their hiring. What in Maastricht we did, we continued it. But what we did is we created this remote training. So none of our controllers lost their license because of not enough hours. We continued with checkouts, not only with training. And these are things we have to start challenging ourselves, thinking in a different way. What was not possible, what was not on the table before COVID showed us we can challenge. We should be looking in this technological innovation, because there is a lot of opportunity, a lot of value is staying there on the table.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point about trying to think differently about how we approach the problem and making it more attractive. But again, you've touched on the point in relation to training itself, and I think a number of speakers have mentioned it. There's a question from Neil Wolfe from McGill University here saying, are there strategies for accelerating the training and certification of ATCOs which have proven successful? And he also makes the point, just in particularly, and maybe Betsy, you can talk about it with the FAA in terms of the new ATC system. That obviously is a particular challenge in terms of how that might work. So maybe Betsy, I'll start with you on that one.
Sure. So as I representing IFATCA, but then also as an ATCO from the United States, I would tell you that ultimately our focus is always safety. And so, you know, trying to rush people through to, I guess, increase the amount of people that we can add to the system, we have to really slow down just a little bit and think, is this the safest thing to do? Mm-hmm. That will ensure that we continue to stay the safest, most efficient, you know, way of travel around the world. And so, you know, we are definitely about recruitment, and we are definitely about ensuring that education is done correctly and that the training is done appropriately. And if there are ways to do it that will absolutely maintain our high level of safety, we are for it. But I know we still have the process of the air traffic controller trains the air traffic controller. And so we're not going to be okay with shortcutting anything that takes that link out of the chain of safety. So, you know, do we need to look at different ways to train people? Because again, as we evolve and we value our people, we need to ensure that we're hitting the needs that they require in their learning. And learning is something that, depending on your personality or your strengths, Milena has a fabulous test that people can take to really learn what is my best way of learning and teaching, and vice versa. As the person who is actually doing the instruction, how can I do better to meet the needs of the person that I'm training? And I think that we really need to just continue to focus on our people and how much we value them to ensure that we get those needs met. Obviously, we saw a huge changeover with COVID, where things slowed way down in the United States. We actually did put training, came to a standstill, and then we slowly started things back up. And so we are behind the power curve. We've been behind the power curve for a while, just because of the way things rolled out with President Reagan when he fired the PATCO controllers. So we knew that there was going to be this gap. Then COVID was definitely one that we didn't anticipate. But through it all, I think it's learning what each generation needs to be successful. And we need to be willing to meet them in the middle and come to them and say, what can I do better to help you understand what you need to know? You know, what is missing from our plan? And that really gets back into the core values of what EDI is in IFATCA, where you feel safe enough to speak up and talk about what your needs are. You feel seen. It's recognized that you are a vital part of this whole process. You are valued not just as, you know, a cog in the wheel, but as the human that is literally the conduit between the airplane and arriving safely or departing safely. And included in that, your voice matters. So I think it just really gets back into, you know, really focusing through the training and all that. We don't ever want to take away a step of safety. But if we focus on our people, I don't think that will happen ultimately.
Okay. Gautier, what's your view on the training perspective and what we should do?
Well, what my organization is doing about this is social dialogue. The way we approach social dialogue is to make jobs more attractive. That's the prime objective we follow when we come to social dialogue. So one of the things that we need to do is to build on the existing D&I toolkit for the whole of aviation into something which is more ATM focused. And for that, we are waiting for the employers, the air navigation service providers, to organize themselves. And I know that Connor is actively working on this to organize so that we can build a fit-for-purpose toolkit and promote it and make sure it is taken up by each organization at national level. And so that's one of the things that we are doing. And probably I should here mention what is so far my legacy to ATM in my function. And that's the EASA medical regulation for ATCOs. For 15 years, they've been saying that you should report a condition to your medical examiner, and the condition was, quote, be pregnant. And that's not necessarily something you know, and so you can be obstructing to the rule without knowing it, for example. And so we fought for 12 years to change the wording in the regulation to be aware of being pregnant. And finally, it's coming into force right now, this change in regulation. So that's a small step. That's even ridiculous when put like this. But that's just an example of why we need to build in this culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion into the whole aviation chain so that we have a fit-for-purpose environment.
12 years is a long time for them to finally take that on board. But so Connor, as Gautier said, they're looking at the ANSPs, the employers, to help in terms of that. What's CANSO's perspective on the training piece and how that can help in terms of retention and developing people?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned sort of in my opening brief a couple of things that CANSO is doing, and it's probably important just to, I suppose, recognize the remit or the power that CANSO does and doesn't have. It's the global voice of airspace, but the actual CANSO staff is a very, very small team. And so ultimately it can lobby, it can advise, it can use its voice. But it's, the action happens at a member level. And, just looking at what Betsy said about safety being the priority, that obviously is Council's view as well. But keeping that sort of sacrosanct, there's still ways in which you can look at how you increase the pipeline. We turned off that tap in 2020, 21, and 22. And we are seeing a shortfall. So, if you have a safety standard and a standard that you need your staff to meet, you have to think, well, which levers can I pull? And so Council is focusing efforts on identifying short and medium term, very actionable means. So, for example, if you believe that you're not passing enough candidates for whatever reason you might think that, or your training is not successful, Council is looking at improving training success rates. If you're quite happy with your standards, and as you say, safety is the priority, but you're still not getting enough through, you've got to increase the flow at the start. So it's looking about increasing capacity of training programs to attract and retain more people, more students into it. And also looking at reducing training times, again, maintaining safety. So those are some of the things that Council is doing through what is called the Operational Training Roundtable.
Okay.
And I suppose as well, we have, I mentioned the side that I represent, the industry side. And we're also very aware that a lot of the challenges that the industry faces in terms of training and recruitment are more on the operational side. So, for example, on the industry side, I'm not yet seeing a challenge attracting people into our industry. It is still an attractive industry when we are looking for maybe more scientific and engineering type staff. It's still a very attractive industry. Elena mentioned socioeconomic factors. It's a fantastic industry for social mobility, upwards mobility, intergenerational mobility, and we advocate that strongly. Even the environment that Gauthier mentioned. So we always ask a kind of provocative question when people come in. We talk about, look, ultimately our job is to safely put more aircraft in the sky. How does that correlate with your sustainability and environmental goals? And the view is, well, we'd rather be in the industry being, taking action rather than being a passerby. So I think there's probably some lessons can be learned from how the industry side recruits and trains, because we're not quite seeing the problem in the same scale. And as I say, Canzo at the same time is doing focus on short-term, medium-term actionable tasks.
Okay. Melania, can I talk to you a little bit about mentoring? I think we mentioned it earlier on. Can you talk to me a little bit about what role you see mentoring playing in terms of trying to make sure we have a sustainable workforce in the longer term?
It is so linked to what my co-panelists were speaking about. Betsy was speaking about delivering content on knowledge and safety. Very important. Gauthier was reaching out for how we have to be inclusive towards people with diverse background. Also very important. Connor spoke about the training and how we have to do different training activities. But here is when mentoring comes. Mentoring ties it all together because it looks at the person who is experiencing all this and not only helps the mentee to be able to share in a safe environment with one person, their own concerns, their fears, how they can address them. Literally ask somebody, what's the best way to approach this or that or that? Can you signpost me? They also, mentoring is very, very, very good for mentors because they develop the ability to guide, to lead people. They increase their understanding of where people come from. They can challenge their own biases in very psychological safety environment. And here is the kick. If you have mentoring as a living practice in your organization, what happens is that circle of feedback, a circle of improved understanding of different backgrounds, circle of listening skills is accelerated and becomes a culture of psychological safety in the whole organization where people feel seen, feel safe, they feel they belong. And that's how the organization becomes also very attractive and safer. To that end, mentoring was recognized as a fundamental tool for improving the culture, improving the recruitment, and being attractive. We, Eurocontrol and ICAO, developed a mentoring course that is given in our Luxembourg facility for free for the people who come from the industry in Europe, and ICAO can deliver it on location, on demand. If you have the chance, do join. It's really, really important and very powerful tool.
Yeah, thanks, Milena. I think mentoring is really important for building the confidence and to give people the ability to move and to develop. And I think both for the mentors and for the people who are being mentored. So we're kind of running out of time here. It's been a fascinating conversation. I'm going to ask each of you just to give me a final wrap up of the kind of key message and takeaway that you would take away from today. So Betsy, you're first one I see there on the screen.
Thank you so much. Again, it's been an honor to be here today. Literally, the future of aerospace and air traffic really depends on diversity, because it affects not only our own personal systems, but throughout the world as we interact with other institutions. And so being open to involving individuals and literally evolving with time is crucial to the success. And so I would highly encourage everyone to continue to seek out DEI basics, or as Milena said, get on Skyberry and you can find the toolkit there to ensure that you are meeting the needs and demands of every human that works for you, both individually and then as a group, so that you can have the most success possible. Because that's when we all succeed, right? Is when we foster each other through learning.
Okay, thanks, Betsy. They're inspiring words. Gautier.
Yes, I've got two messages I think I am taking out of today's event. The first one is to ANSPs, so navigation service providers and training organizations, and my colleagues as well. Engage in EU social dialogue to build an appropriate diversity, equity, and inclusion toolkit. And the second message is to policymakers at national and international level and airspace users. Let us have the funding we need to deliver up to expectations.
Thanks, Gautier. Milena.
Few of the takeaways: collaborate, work together. You don't need to do it alone. There is a lot out there, and there is a lot that we can exchange and learn from one another. Communicate, communicate, and communicate. For too many, we are blind, and many are blind to our business. Engage in mentoring, reach out in effective and innovative manner, because we have to remember aviation is a power for good. We offer a lifelong works for many of our people, so let's do it together.
Okay, thanks, Milena. And as usual, Conor, the last word to the industry.
Thank you very much. For the Irish, one of the two. I mean, I'll speak from a council point of view. We really need international collaboration. We're aware that the members are doing some good things at a local and a national level. We need to promote those at a regional and an international level. So, please do get involved if you can with the Council DEI working group. I think that's much more important these days, when you see a lot of countries sort of retrenching into a nationalist and sort of isolationist kind of view. And then finally, we have with the best part of about 80 or 90 people watching today. So that must mean people are interested enough to give an hour on a Tuesday to listen to this kind of thing. And thank you for that. But remember, please, there's no one big thing that solves this. Don't just be an observer. Be an activist. Start doing things as well as just watching and listening from the sidelines.
Okay. Thanks, Conor. So listen, first of all, I'd like to thank all the panelists for an excellent seminar. I think the kind of key messages which I'm taking is about none of us can do this on our own. We need collaboration in order to do it. We need to be proactive in terms of it. And it makes sense from a business point of view, from a social justice point of view, in order to make sure that our industry continues to grow in a resilient way, which provides rewarding careers for the people there. But we need to set it. We need to be proactive in terms of doing that. So again, I'd just like to thank the panelists. We could have gone on for another half an hour. I didn't manage to get to all of the questions which are there, but again, thank you for people online for your comments and questions. And again, just to acknowledge the quality of the interaction which we have. So nothing here is for free. So the last thing is the ad to stay tuned for our next webinar, which is on the 1st of July. And that's dealing with the really interesting topic of civil military ATM integration for space operations. So stay tuned for that and put it in your diaries. And it only remains for me to thank everyone for attending today and for your time. And again, thanks to all my panelists. And I'd like to wish you all a very good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you all.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.